one, go.
Well, happy Friday, everyone. We decided to try a little bit different format this week for our legislative report. We're going to try these every once in a while, and if you like the format, please let us know. If you prefer to get it in the written format, let me know that as well. But we thought we'd try something a little different. So I'm just going to give you a rundown of what happened this week and give you an idea of what we expect to happen next week. For example, we did have one bill that was up in hearing this week that we were monitoring, not a bill we took a position on, and that was LB 504, Senator Brewer's moratorium, 2-year moratorium on wind development in the Sandhills. And this was a bill we stayed out of, but we did watch and listen to the testimony, and it was pretty lopsided with respect to opposition or support for the bill, supporting the 2-year moratorium versus the developers and what the bill sponsor referred to as the paid suits to provide testimony in opposition to the bill supporting continued development of wind development in the Sandhills. Don't know what's going to happen with that bill. It's not likely that it's going to go anywhere since it doesn't have a priority status, but that's just a little bit of an update. Now, you may recall last week I told you that the bills dealing with retail choice would be held in exec session this week, and they would make a decision on whether to kill them, hold them, or whatever. We're fairly certain those bills all will be indefinitely postponed or killed, but they postponed their Wednesday exec session to Thursday. They then postponed their Thursday exec session to Friday today, and today they actually postponed it without rescheduling an exec session. Don't take that as any sign that there's concern about those bills. We do still expect at least LB 657, the unbundling bill, and LB 660, the bill that outlines retail wheeling, to be killed. We're hopeful that LB 547 will. In fact, that's the message we're receiving from the committee. But Senator Watermeyer is working that bill pretty hard. So we are in turn working the committee to remind them that this is one part of a 3-part package and none of those bills should advance. Now, other bills that they've been looking at and we're supposed to discuss in executive session were the bills dealing with community solar. You may remember that Senator Larson had a community solar bill that was heard earlier in the session, and then last week we also heard LB 429, which was Senator Wishart's bill to provide a definition of virtual net metering. And then we had a bill to allow for the use of the environmental trust grants for community solar projects. And then lastly, there was LB 87 that was heard, which was the which was the net metering bill, which expanded net metering from 25 kW threshold to 100 kW threshold. It would have expanded the system cap from 1% to 5%, and we proposed to allow for the aggregation of generation resources to aggregate maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 multiple meters. So that was a bill that we did come in heavily opposed to. Now, we are trying to work with Senator Kalowski and incorporating some of what Senator Wishart did in her bill to find some kind of medium language that would not constitute a mandate for either of those proposals. And as long as there's no mandate, we can at least come in, support language, and allow something to advance. Now, LB 87 is another story. All of the components of that bill are components that we do oppose. Now, I do continue to get communication from Graham Christensen, who was the main proponent of this bill, who actually had a hand in drafting them, looking for ways or areas that we can compromise on. And I assured him I would pose that question to the membership to see if there is anything that we are willing to compromise on, but I could not promise him. And I told him I would not be the one lobbying the membership, that was his responsibility if he wanted to see further changes. So we're going to continue working with them. We had on the 2 bills dealing with community solar and virtual net metering. Again, we're going to talk about the language, but we are going to only move forward if there is absolutely no mandate in that process. Now, one other bill that we worked on this week that was heard earlier was LB 389. And you may recall this was the bill introduced on behalf of Verizon to expedite a process for them to get small cell technology out in the field. Now, the way the bill is drafted, it is fairly onerous because it pretty much gives them a we can't say no process for putting these on infrastructure such as street lights and power poles that may be in an authority's right-of-way. There are a lot of concerns with that bill. The bill would bring us under the guidelines from FCC for pole attachments, which we have a current federal exemption from. The bill doesn't specifically address safety issues or concerns, and we have some major issues with having third-party operators up on our infrastructure. Similar bills have been introduced in other states. Many of those have exempted out rural utility poles or rural utility providers from the legislation. While they've asked us to provide some language, I think my first inclination is to move forward with exempting us out of the bill, but we'll also look at if we can get some clear assurances that the FCC guidelines would go away, our safety concerns are addressed, and that no one would have access to our infrastructure without prior written approval, even after they receive a permit. Those are things that we will at least address with them to see where that bill may go. The last thing I want to talk about for this week's update is the hearings that we may see next week. On Monday, March 6th, we're going to see a variety of hearings on workers' compensation. We do have positions on some of those bills, and I will update you if there are any problems with the legislation that move forward. On Wednesday, March 8th is a different story. Senator Ebke's LB 510 will be heard by the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee, and this is a bill that would limit the amount of installment debt that a utility could carry to $25 million. And of course, in a heavily capital intensive industry such as ours, it can be easy to reach that even with a small utility if they are doing large improvements, replacing distribution line or building sub-transmission. So we are going to come in and heavily oppose that bill. With that, that ends my report for this week. I appreciate any comments you may have, and again, as always, if you have any questions for us, please drop us an email, call, or stop in, and we'd be happy to talk to you.